Well, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. We're here at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum for another edition of Fun with Aviation. Yay! We hope you're all doing well, and this is going to be another good day for you all. Stay safe. These are our two airplanes today that we're going to be talking about. This is the O-2A Skymasters. The airplanes were built in the 60s. Actually, before that, they were a conversion of an airplane from a civilian airplane into a military airplane for the Air Force, for Vietnam during about 1961 or so. The airplane was designed to replace the O-1 Bird Dog. However, it never really did that. It did it for after a while, after the OV-10s came into service in the late 60s. So we're going to talk about both of these airplanes today. They both had similar yet different missions. And again, the first one we've got here is the O-2A Super. Actually, it's a Super Skymaster. There were much of different variations that were made on the airplane to make it a military variation, and we'll talk about that as we move around the airplane a little bit. So going to mention that this airplane is a two-engine airplane, one in front, one in back. That added stability to the airplane in the event that you lost an engine, rather than having it asymmetric like in an OV-10. Normally a two-person crew, but it was often flown with by one person. We've got some names on this airplane. Jerry Stephan Nail 57. Nail was his call sign, and he was the one who did the restoration on both of these airplanes. Back almost 10 years ago now, maybe even longer. They have been updated since then and repainted a couple of times. But here's some of the big variations. If we look under the wing, there were racks, bomb racks, we refer to them as, that were put on the airplanes so that you could hang ordnance on the outside of the airplane. That was the biggest thing. Morning, James. That was the biggest difference on this airplane, is that they added the bomb racks, and we'll talk about some of the externals. But normally, what the externals would do is they would allow you to hang rockets and other things on the outside of the airplane. I've got a new gimbal today. I hope it's going to be a little steadier, but it's brand new, and so at any rate, we may have some issues here with it. We'll see. We'll see what it seems to have a mind of its own here a little bit, which I guess is part of the idea. So two wing racks, or two stations on the outside and on the inside. You'll notice this little fence, and it's right outside the landing light. This is the landing light on the wing, and that little fence there is to keep the reflection from going in the cockpit into the pilot's eyes. Here's a pitot-static tube. We've seen that on virtually everything, and we got another little device here that we haven't talked about much. And right here, you'll see it's got a little flipper, and that little flipper just flips along, and that's a stall warning indicator. If you start to lose the even flow of the air across the wing, that will start to vibrate, and it sets off a clacker in the airplane, so that you know that you're getting close to stall speed on the airplane. You may have noticed a little cricket up there in the front of the airplane. The cricket is emblematic of Cricket Facts. That was just their little symbol. A lot of the different forward air control units had different types of call signs. There were crickets, there were ravens, there were hostages. That's a Marine Corps one. There clip clop, nail. Let's see, rustic, covey. There were lots and lots of different ones. So this airplane is an actual O-2. This one did serve in Vietnam. It was originally went to Vietnam and went to Bien Hoa with the 20th TAS. It also served with, or O-2s also served with 19th and the 23rd, and also with the rustics. This particular airplane, we believe, was with the 19th and the 20th. Not exactly sure about the history on it. After the war, it served with Air National Guard units around the country. And so a number of different Air National Guard units. And when it finished the military service, it went into service with Highway Patrol. Twin tails, not like the OV-10. There's an OV-10 that's just down the road there a little bit. But twin tails. And so initially when when the OV-10s came into service, they were mistaken as being O2s, but as opposed to the O2s not being able to shoot back, really the OV-10s could. It's about 29 feet long, about 38 feet wingspan, and it stands about 9 feet tall. There are a couple of these here in the local area that you may see at air shows and things like that. There's a gray one that operates out of, I believe it's the Kavanaugh Flight Museum in Addison, and then Karen Brinkley has a black one that she flies around here quite often. Really nice restoration on that one. Beautiful airplane. And these airplanes are referred to as ducks. It was the Oscar Deuce, and got the moniker of the duck. Here's something we don't often show, but here's a couple little panels right here, and those are called gust locks. They're not just used here at the museum; they're used on actual airplanes also. And the intent is that these are going to hold the control surfaces in the event that there's inclement weather or windy weather and that kind of thing, so that the control surfaces don't just bang around. Now, a couple of things I want you to notice, because there are going to be some differences when we get over to the night airplane. There's a little tail light so you can see where you're in the back of the airplane. There's a wingtip light that we didn't show. Up here in the top, you will see a red light, a red beacon. Okay, and that's an anti-crash light. Let's see. Okay, that's an anti-crash light or anti-collision light, so that you can see that in the daytime sometimes and the nighttime. There's another tail light, and it will have another light over here on this wingtip. It's always red on the left or on the port side, and it's green on the starboard side. Although we don't have good covers on them at this point. So here's another landing light with the fence, as you can see, and here's a little detail on the racks. So it can carry a load of 350 pounds. These are not big bomb racks, big heavy ones like we saw on the A7 and on the F-105. In fact, they're not even as big and heavy as the ones on the OV-10. Now, we do have the cockpit on this one has been restored. It's been a few years ago, but it's still been restored, and we still got it. My gimbal's not. Oops. Sorry about that. It decided to, like I said, it's kind of got a little bit of a mind of its own here right here today. So here's the cockpit. This is the office, so to speak, on the airplane. There's normally we've got a C-130 going overhead right now. We'll just wait a second. So Jerry Steffen and his workmate on this one, Glenn Hill, did a wonderful job. When this airplane first came to us, it was completely gutted in the interior, and they completely redid it. You can see it's got controls for two pilots. Normally the pilot sat on the left side, and there would be an observer on the right-hand side. You can see we've got a gun sight here, although that's not used for guns so much as it is for delivering rockets. But it's a normal instrumentation, what we kind of refer to in this day and age as steam gauges, to control radios on this panel. And then you've got engine indicators here. And there's the throttles and the props and those controls here. And then trim and more comm. Now, we mentioned this is an observation airplane, and its job is to talk to people all over the place. And so in the back of this airplane, and this was one of the modifications that Cessna made, was that this airplane had racks and racks of radios. And you'll see on the outside, I'll show you those here in a second. In fact, I can show you that now, other than one thing I want you to mention. No ejection seat on this airplane. Yep, okay, there we go. No ejection seat on this airplane. The pilot and the observer would wear a parachute. They oftentimes would carry M16s with them in the airplane. Sometimes they'd shoot them out the windows. But there was always the problem of hot brass coming back in the airplane. They used binoculars a lot to be able to identify targets, and at night they used starlight scopes to be able to see at night. Their job was to find targets and then be able to reduce those using other means. And so what that meant in a lot of cases that even though the service ceiling on this airplane was almost 20,000 feet, normal operating altitudes were going to be between 1,000 and 3,000, and oftentimes they would be a lot lower because you've got to get down, you've got to be able to see your targets. Here's another one of the modifications that was made on this airplane is windows in the door and in the nose so that you had a little bit better visibility. It's not great visibility on this airplane, but it was modified somewhat so that it could have. Doc Lambert, Nail 66, is one of our docents here. He will oftentimes be out here when we have open cockpit days and tell the guests about the airplane. So you can notice up on the top a bunch of protuberances. That one, the one right in the very front, these are all antennas for radios. All kinds of different radios: UHF, VHF, FM radios, high freq radios. You had the ability to be able to talk to all kinds of people all over the world with these airplanes. And we've got Deborah Mayer's talking about the 2.75-inch Willie Peets. We're going to talk about those with the black airplane and the Lao 68 rocket launchers and the flares. Going to talk about that in just a little bit, but there's a little cricket fact, or a little cricket. So we're going to go over here now and we're going to talk about the black airplane. This airplane, the black one, is one of the first stealth airplanes that the Air Force had. Believe that or not, one of the first ones. Now, you might have remembered from World War II and even Korea that they would paint airplanes black as night fighters. And that's essentially the same thing here, although there were other modifications made to this airplane that I'm going to show you and see. How can we get some advance notice of these live broadcasts? We're putting them out on Facebook and announcing them. They're every Wednesday at noon and every Saturday at noon. So that's where we're putting this out, is on the social media about this stuff. And so we're glad to have you here for this. This airplane is interesting because this is technically it's not a real O2, as opposed to the gray one, which we know had a military history. This is an airplane that we refer to as our Frankenstein, because we put this one together from parts of about 5 different aircraft. Now, what we did though is we did this as a representation of an airplane that's really very famous within the Air Force community, and it is called the Cootie J. There goes the 130 again. So again, you can see our little cricket fact up there, and underneath it says Cootie J. And so we also see that the crew is Don Brown and Pat Sweeney. Well, Don's wife was named Judy, and Pat Brown's wife was named Kay. So they transpositioned the first 2 letters and called it the Cootie J. Kill marks. You don't see those on Air Force airplanes very much, especially during Vietnam, because the Air Force didn't like them. But these guys operated kind of out of the way, and this is what they accomplished over a period of about 6 months. Trucks, and that's all about the Ho Chi Minh Trail and operating the trail. And the other one are anti-aircraft guns. Now, this doesn't mean that this airplane killed them, but what it does mean is that this airplane found them and controlled air on those targets. Now, we talked about the rocket launchers, 2.75-inch rockets. These are replicas, but these airplanes, day or night, could carry as many as 4 of these. At night, they didn't normally do that because they were also going to be carrying either parachute flares or log flares. And I'll tell you what those are all about. But the warheads on these were white phosphorus warheads. So that what that would do is when the rocket hits the ground, you get a big burst of smoke that you can see from a long way off. And the forward air controller in the airplane would then be able to direct other aircraft, if he's controlling aircraft, to where they need to be. If he's controlling artillery, it's different. Then you're not putting a mark on the ground. You're giving coordinates off of a map to an artillery battery, and then they are going ahead from there and firing rounds. You fire rounds to see whether they're on target or not, and then the forward air controller or an artillery officer, if you had one on the airplane, would adjust the fire until the fire was on target. So in the OV-10, we also shot boats. I don't mean shot at them, but we would control naval gunfire on the boats. And as opposed to artillery, where you're telling people left or right, long or short, when you're shooting naval gunfire, you would also be able to tell them up or down, because they actually have the ability on the boat to raise the guns up and down. So sometimes if you couldn't quite get the rounds on target, raising the gun or lowering it a little bit, and it's a much flatter trajectory than artillery would be, but sometimes that would help. Now, two different kinds of flares for night work. Now, you may read some things that will tell you that when the OV-10s came into service, that the O-2s continued to do the night work because it was too bright in the cockpit on the OV-10. I'm here to tell you that's absolutely wrong. Every one of these airplanes have the ability to turn the lights up or down, and at night you're flying with red lights. And it's going to be important here in a second. So the whole idea about it being too bright in the OV-10 cockpit was just totally wrong. I even read something that said they modified the cockpit. They didn't do anything with the OV-10. You turned the lights down. You would sometimes fly at night with the lights completely off when you're in the target area. So, at any rate, get back to this. The rockets are 2.75 inch. Now, paraflares came in single tubes, and they were about the same size as the rockets. We've had some here, but they're being worked on right now, so we don't have them on the airplane. But they would hang on the same rack. You would adjust the paraflare for how long you wanted it to illuminate. So you had this parachute flare that came out, a 28-foot canopy, big canopy, almost as big as the airplane. And then the flare would hang down below there, and it would burn for anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes at 1,000,000 candle power. And I'm here to tell you, 1,000,000 candle power gets really, really bright. It also has a tendency to throw a lot of shadows around. So it's very disorienting at night to be working targets. All right, I'll show you this real quick. And there's the 130. So at any rate, back to the flares. The flares had come out, they'd hang, but when they would burn out, they were supposed to burn out the cords on the parachute, and the parachute was supposed to go ahead and descend to the ground. It didn't always happen. So it became very dangerous around the targets at night, because you'd be running in, and you may see the shadows of, or in some cases, people would run into the parachutes that were gliding down to the ground. Okay, so problem with the big flares is it killed your night vision. You've got rods and cones in your eyes, and at night, your vision uses rhodopsin. Well, bright lights kill the rhodopsin, and it gives you kind of blindness. And so that's why in airplanes you have red lights in the cockpit, because the red lights do not absorb the rhodopsin. So you can have red lights in the cockpit. It does not affect your night vision. Now, we used another flare also, and it was called a log flare. It was about the size of a 1 foot long 4x4. Let's just put it about at that size. No parachute, nothing. You would drop the log flare off of the airplane, and it would go down and it would hit the ground, and it would burn for 30 minutes. The intent was normally they would drop these out, and we would put the log flares at the beginning of the run-in line and down where the target was, so that the planes would know that the target was between the log flares on the ground. You're talking about nighttime and it's dark, and this is all you see are 2 spots of light on the ground. Sometimes we would do it with one, but there's a problem with this thing, and after a while they kind of outlawed them because they're very, very dangerous. There's a thing called autokinesis, and here's the science part of today's discussion. Autokinesis, and you can all do this tonight. Do it tonight. Go outside, look at a star, find a planet, and stare at it. And autokinesis is that what starts to happen is that your eye is going to move to keep that object in focus. But what do we have? We've got rhodopsin. When the rhodopsin gets absorbed, the eye moves to another set of cones. So what's happening is that as you watch a single point of light, and do this with a star tonight. The moon doesn't work so much, it's too big. But find a star, find a planet, and stare at it for a little while, and you're going to swear that that thing is moving around, because it will start to look like it's jittering around. That's just your eye changing focus on that point of light as the rhodopsin is being used up. Well, the same thing would happen with the pilots. They're looking at two spots of light on the ground, and they're staring at them as they're flying around in their pattern. They're staring at them as they're in their dive, and the problem becomes is they start to see that light moving around, so they start moving the airplane when in fact the light's not moving at all. So there were a lot of collisions with the ground because of that, and so they were outlawed because of that issue. Okay, so now, here's a real good example right here. You'll notice the wingtip light on the right. All you see is the crystal, but what do we see on the left? This is stealth technology here. This is stealth technology, excuse me, at its finest. So what did they do with the light here? Simple. They put a little box around it so that you can't see the light from the ground. You can see it from up above, but that's not where the enemy is. In fact, you want the other airplanes to be able to see you on the ground or from above. So we had these little reflectors on the airplane so that you could not see the lights from the ground. So what else do we have? Well, remember we pointed out the anti-collision light here on the gray airplane. So we're going to look over here. I'm not sure I've got this new gimbal all figured out yet, but I will by maybe Saturday. We'll see. What do you see on the tail on the other airplane? Yeah. See a little cup. Looks like a little cup or a little funnel. That's another guard for the anti-collision light. So you can't see it from the ground when it's going off. You can see it. You can see it from above, and that's fine. Although normally, when you were out tactical, you would turn your anti-collision lights off anyway because it becomes very distracting to see a flashing light. Otherwise, this airplane is the same. Hang on here a second. Sorry about that. Otherwise, this airplane is the same as the gray one. Like I said, at night though, they would use starlight scopes in a lot of cases. But night operations was very dangerous. These airplanes were used for that, using flares and using rockets. The pylon looks to be mounted backwards. From all of our indications, and we've had people who flew these out here, they tell us that they're correct. So I will let other people on our restoration team be the ones to look into that and answer that question. Let's see. I haven't been watching the notes too much. If anybody had questions that I haven't answered, if you want to go ahead and bring those up again. This airplane, the interior is essentially vacant. That's why we have the windows covered over. The O-2s were not only flown by the Air Force lent some of them out to the Army, so the Army flew them. There were about 500 or so of these that were built. The Air Force and the Army both lost, I believe it was about 150 to 175 of them over in Southeast Asia. Dangerous job, low and slow. Sometimes you had to get down real low and real slow. And so in addition to the United States Air Force, the Navy used them for a while to when the pilots would go out to the ranges to practice their bombing missions. The Navy used, I think it was 6 O-2s to be essentially forward air controllers or range control out on the targets. Today, the California Department of Forestry, or Cal Fire, flies some of these in addition to the OV-10s. They use them as lead-in airplanes, which are essentially a forward air control airplane for fire. Let's see, and we've got a couple of other countries that flew them. One of them was Botswana, and I'm not certain what the other one was. It Portugal? Not exactly sure, but mostly they were flown here, and they continued to fly throughout the war and well after that. So the OV-10 and the O-2 replaced the O-1, but the O2s were never completely replaced. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, and we're running up here on about 25 minutes. So I'm going to just let you know again, we do these every Wednesday and every Saturday at noon. I'll pick different airplanes. If the weather is good this Saturday, we're going to do the F-111, the Aardvark. And if the weather doesn't hold, we will do some kind of an indoor game. We presently have on our Facebook page, we have a model airplane contest going on. If you've made models of any of the airplanes out here in the petting zoo, you are welcome to send in up to 3 pictures, and we will judge those at the end of the month. We've had some coloring contests and photo contests, and if you like the videos, there's a lot more of these online for you. You can go to our YouTube channel under the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, and you will find a lot of videos there. A lot on the airplanes, and a lot of them also on what's going on inside the museum. So with that in mind, please be safe, keep your distance, wash your hands, clean your plate, and do all of those good things so that we can get through this all together. And once again, if you've enjoyed this and you'd like to throw a buck or two into our little donation jar, it's right up there at the buttons up at the top of the screen. So with that in mind, unless we don't have any other questions, let's see. Oh, yeah. You can download coloring pages, and you can download paper airplanes off of our website. If you go to fortworthaviationmuseum.com and go under the aviation resources link, you'll find a lot of things there. You'll find paper airplanes, you'll find some STEM projects, and you'll find coloring pages for the younger folks, although we've had some adults who've had some fun with those too. So at any rate, thanks again for tuning in today. Hope you have a good rest of the week, and I hope you come back on Saturday to see us. Thanks, folks.